In today's lesson, we're going to compare arrays versus array lists. First off, both arrays and array lists are collections. That means they can contain multiple pieces of data at the same time. So let's go through these differences. So first off, arrays can't change size, but array lists, their size is dynamic. Thus, they can change. Arrays can hold anything. So they can hold primitive data types and objects. But they only can hold that type once it's made. So if it's an integer array, it can only hold integers. Array lists, on the other hand, can hold only objects, and it can hold different objects at the same time. Arrays are an object, and they have a length. Array lists is also an object, and it has a size, which is going to also be 0, just like an array. An array list, the index indicates where the elements are stored, and the index starts at 0. So if it's length 10, it'll be indexes 0 through 9. An array list is the same idea. The index indicates where the elements are stored, and the index starts at 0. And the indexes, if its size is 10, its indexes will be 0 through 9. And both of them store elements. That's what it's storing. The elements are stored at these index values. So there's a comparison between array and array lists. Now let's look at how we declare them and initialize some of their values. So an array, I declare in either fashion here, and that declares an array of size 5. I can also declare and initialize an array at the same time. And so I've initialized its values, and thus that also creates an array of size 5. So an array list, I can create like this. So ArrayList AR equals new array list, and it will be empty. There will be nothing in the list. I can also create an array list based on a collection. So ArrayList AR is going to be equal to, as an array list, whatever was in A, which was an array. I can also create an array list and send it a number, and that will create an array list that is that size. Now there's nothing in it, but it is of size 5. I can also create a generic array list. The key when creating a generic array list is declaring the type of object that this array list will be storing. Now let's look at how we can initialize or assign values to our array list. So we declare our array and array list. And so with an array, you have to indicate the index inside the brackets. So a of 0 equals 4, a of 3 equals 10. Now, this gives me an error, out of bounds. Since our array is length 5, that means it has index values 0 through 4. So if I try to do index 5, it gives me an error. Now, in an array list, I add the objects like this. I just say ar.add, and then I put in the parentheses the objects. I can use the add method here with 2 parameters, and what that does is it takes the first parameter, which is an integer. That's the index it's going to add the object to. So it adds the object to that index and pushes whatever was there over to the next index and pushes everything else over as well. I can use the set method, which sets the index to a value. So whatever was there is overwritten by this new object. And just like arrays, I can get out of bounds errors. So if I try to add index 7 to my array, that's out of bounds because my array doesn't have that many objects. So let's look at how we can get the values from our arrays and array lists. So an array Let's assume we've assigned values to it. I can do comparisons. So if x is equal to a of 3, I can also just directly assign, so b equals a of 0. So we can get all the values from it. An array list, again, we're going to assume we have assigned values to it. I can do comparisons. I can also get its value. So b equals ar.get 0. Now, one thing you need to be careful about with array lists is everything in an array list is stored as an object. So when I do this, it's going to return an object of the object class. This means if you stored, say, a string inside the array list, you would need to cast it to a string to use any of the string methods. Now let's look at how we remove values. So we assign a value to a. Now note here, there really isn't a way to remove values from the array. The best thing you could do would be set the value to some predetermined value. In other words, if I want it to be nothing, I could just set it equal to, hey, this flag here of negative 9,999. But I can't really remove anything from the array because its size can't change. But an array list, again, we're going to assume we assign values, I can do ar.remove3, and that will remove from index 3 whatever the object is. I can also do this ar.remove and send in an object. Wherever the object is in the array list, it will be removed. Now let's look at the dimensions. We've talked about this before. An array, you use a.length. Notice there's no parentheses there. But array list, we use ar.size. And there are parentheses because it's a method. And that's the idea on comparing arrays to array lists. Remember a lot of these key concepts here. It's important to remember these when you're working with arrays and array lists. And that is the end of this lesson.